Welcome to the Canadian Association of the Club for Rome Zoom presentation series. My name is Rick Carpenter, and I shall be hosting today's presentation by Dr. Art Hunter, titled The Energy Transition, How Microgrids Can Help Rebuild Ontario's Power Grid and Electrify Everything. Art needs a little introduction to our group. If we can be seen as a microgrid linked to other national associations of the Club for Rome, as well as the broader world web of scientific curiosity, Art is a rather special distributed energy resource within our microgrid. He's the nanogrid who has energized our group through establishing and running our Zoom presentation series, of which his talk will be the 109th. Whether terms you're familiar with, like microgrids or DERs, whether you're familiar with these terms or not, you're in for a most informative talk, followed by our usual Q&A session. If you have a question or a comment, please post it in the chat section, and I will invite Art to respond to questions in the order they are received. As you will know, Art practices what he preaches. Today, for our benefit, he's preaching what he practices. Art, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. That was an interesting introduction. The first slide here, I'd like to just show everyone what the control room at the ISO looks like. And this is what's controlling Ontario's grid. This is one of the workstations. And there are several workstations like this. And in the next slide, I'm going to be talking about the energy transition itself. The core issue, of course, for this energy transition is how to integrate renewable power generation and storage technologies into the Ontario electricity power grid, and going after robustness, decarbonization, decentralization, demand growth, cost reduction, and disaster management. That's quite a mouthful. Business as usual, delay and denial are just unacceptable from here on forward. The objective of this presentation is to introduce a fair and effective means to assist in climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, while reversing the cost escalation of electrical energy for all Ontario consumers. From the perspective of the grid managers, a distributed energy resource is, and I quote, a resource that is directly connected to the distribution system or indirectly connected to the distribution system behind the customer's meter. It generates energy, stores energy, or controls loads. For example, things like pumped hydro storage, wind energy, solar farms, gas turbines, diesel generators, megapack batteries, and demand response systems that reduce load on demand or provide ancillary services. A microgrid can exist without a connection to the grid, and it only becomes a distributed energy resource, a DER, when authorized and connected to the grid according to some contractually specified conditions. Location of the microgrid is vital due to limitations of transmission capacity to the load. An aggregated DER could consist of many microgrids separated by large distances. They need not all be in the same neighborhood. The International Energy Agency identified 6 technological decentralized energy sectors generating emissions. 70% of these emissions can be reduced by well-designed microgrids, i.e. electrification, energy efficiency, renewables. And of course, reducing CO2 emissions is a primary requirement. Support. There's a lot of support that's available. It seems like the federal government in Canada is supporting the use of renewables through their clean electricity standard. Provincial governments, city governments, healthcare providers, citizens, industries, NGOs, universities. In fact, most organizations who seek action, I mean, renewable energy products are given high respect by most citizens. But of course, the fossil fuel industry lobby has been and is continuing to be successful in pushing to go slow using propaganda, misinformation, distortions, and sowing doubt. We are more reliant on electricity for comfort, convenience, and survival than ever before. And our tolerance for outages, especially for seniors, is lower than ever. This is a growing disparity. Climate solutions. Many technologies have been developed to decarbonize generation and storage of our energy sources, from both grid-tied and off-grid innovations. The challenges become how to deliver this electrical energy to the end consumer via the existing and a highly modified electrical grid. The Ontario electrical grid is used as a case study for this presentation, but the technologies and techniques are similar in other jurisdictions. The primary requirements are to improve reliability, reduce cost, reduce fossil fuel use, enhance survival by reducing deadly outages, and advance integration of distributed energy resources as non-wired alternatives. Now, two terms, DERs and NWAs. NWA and wireless solutions make reference to these 300-kilometer long distance high voltage towers carrying 50,000 volts on copper wire. Placing the supply generators close to the demand loads is considered an NWA, a non-wired alternative. Energy efficiencies are NWAs as well. Alternatives to expanding and maintaining this long distance delivery system are a central part of grid modernization. And silos. Of course, the objective here on this presentation is to destroy the myth that silos exist by showing that the electrical power generation, electrical vehicles, and microgrids are strongly linked into a system rather than three separate silos. A wide variety of microgrid hardware is already commercially available, with many more in the development stage. The only substantive outstanding issues are regulations, appropriate business models, management, finance and capital, and scaling to deploy these existing technologies. This presentation drills down into microgrids to explore their inner workings and show they are an attractive pathway to deliver renewable energy to end users. The second objective of this presentation, on the next slide, is of course to illustrate that there is ample evidence that we are in the Anthropocene, where human activity has taken us into resource consumption overshoot, and our population is far in excess of being sustainable. Predictions of a major population correction driven by Earth's natural forces is inevitable, as humanity will not voluntarily undertake this correction. The only debate, as far as I'm concerned, is when this correction will start, when it'll stop, and what the state of humanity and Earth resources and natural systems will be. Some say we should acknowledge this inevitable adjustment as it has already started. It is a disaster by any definition, and humanity should be in the position of preparing to survive. This presentation advances microgrids as they have the potential to make individual or community power available prior to, during, and after this population correction. Prepare to survive. There are four main energy transition targets for this presentation. The first one being the traditional electrical power generation. Second, building loads, which include, of course, heating, cooling, lighting, appliances, and any other specialty demands. The third, industry demands, including a broad spectrum of energy requirements and transportation of people, goods, and in fact, I'll even be talking about how electric vehicles can move energy around in their batteries. Our centralized, fragile, and antiquated electricity grid is presently the main supplier of electrical energy over wires. Microgrids can participate in all four categories at a community scale. These could be from a few hundred, say greater than 100,000 homes in a single aggregation. Millions of microgrids could exist in the province of Ontario. Microgrids will minimize distribution and transportation losses of up to about 7%, as local generation is very close to the load. And of course, efficiency is an NWA. Two modes of operation, of course, have to be considered. One is the normal, and the second is grid outage survival mode. Now, I have an example here in Dallas, Fort Worth. There is community planning going on, which is to include 200,000 microgrids aggregated into a virtual power plant. They propose using zinc batteries that are cheaper than lithium, and they want to make the homes from recycled plastic board without any timber. And they claim that this is going to add about $20,000 to the cost of each house. I've included a link there for anyone interested in the original article. And as comparison, the Manatic microgrid, my home, return on investment after 60 months was 27,000 Canadian or 21,300 US. So those numbers are quite close. In the next slide, I want to show you some performance. And because I maintain and keep all this data, the top blue supply history demonstrates rapid growth in the summer, and that moderates the very slow growth in the winter when the curve flattens. So you can see it wiggling there, and you can see the flat areas are clearly the winter. And the lower red demand history looks surprisingly quite linear, though the seasons, through the seasons, the demand also includes the charging of one electric vehicle. And in fact, you can't even see that on the curve. The spread of the average slope of the two diverging lines is the kilowatt hour profit, which I sell to the utility. Modernization in the next slide is Ontario has acknowledged that it is aging grid infrastructure in hydro and nuclear generation, as well as transformers and transmission lines. Modernization is required. Demand is expanding with population growth, of course. Energy costs have strong growth pressures, and someone has coined the term fossilflation. Modernization requires a forever way to reduce cost with an increase in resilience and reliability. The global microgrid market expected to reach a valuation of some $36 billion US by 2028, and another pundit came out and predicted $206 billion in the USA alone by 2031. The point is that it's respected as being a very large market, and that is likely to grow. And there's so many market studies out there, it can keep you going full time every day. Many of the energy technologies are mature, and more innovations are being funded all the time. The next slide, a recent report from the U.S. National Renewable Energy Lab concluded that with sufficient storage, renewable generation could meet as much as 94% of the demand. In October 21, the U.S. Department of Energy activated 10 connected communities projects that will equip more than 7,000 buildings with smart control, sensors, and analytics that have saved 18 million in electricity costs and cut 80 megatons of emissions each year. These are community microgrids consisting of single-family and multi-family homes, both owner-occupied and rental properties. I've included a URL there as well. This is, it is clear that EVs can be a grid resource by using EV batteries to help meet peak demand. EVs are not just a new load. Economic modeling, as EV penetrations become more versatile, predict total energy expenses decreased significantly. Using simulated data, the model cut the energy consumption cost by 50 to 85%. That's very significant. Of course, the big cost items in the grid are the transmission tower lines and large generating stations. North American grids. In Canada, USA, and Mexico, we have 3 of them, and they're known as East-West, and of course, Texas is independent. Each has grown, has been optimized over the past 130 years, but is now fragile, but they are stable. A major flawed decision was that their design is based on the last 20 years' weather forces, and we know that those are no longer reliable. Today, solar and wind have matured to be the lowest cost for electricity production, feeding nuclear, hydro, gas turbines, coal, and diesel. Geothermal heating and cooling is least understood and utilized, but it is the cheapest. We look at tidal, wave, biological, and both fission and fast breeder small modular reactors, as well as the now off low energy nuclear reactors, are some other competing generating technologies. How is the grid managed in Ontario? Well, the top board is, of course, the Ontario Energy Board. They are the provincial regulator with the board of directors appointed by the Ontario government. Next is the Ontario Power Generator. Ontario Power Generation. These are the folks who build, maintain, operate all the provincially owned generating stations. Then the Independent Electricity System Operator, IESO, is the grid manager. They are the wholesale buyer from the OPG and from neighboring jurisdictions using aging grid tower lines and transformer stations. They are wholesale traders with neighbor jurisdictions like Quebec, New York, Michigan, Manitoba, and they retail energy to local distribution companies. Well, LDCs, local distribution companies, there's 38 of those in Ontario, with names which you'll probably recognize Ottawa Hydro, Hydro One, Pembroke Hydro, Hamilton Hydro, etc. Each has its own local management, transformer stations, and a transmission grid to deliver energy to its retail customers. The grid manager's mandate is that for every second, for 365 days, the power supply must equal demand. This applies to every corner of the grid, but there are many variable local demands. The demand, of course, varies constantly due to ambient air conditions, office and manufacturing hours, supported activities like heating, cooling, cooking, or entertainment. Microgrids can be a helpful tool to the IESO as they handle power inconsistencies from regional renewable resources and provide ancillary services to bulk power systems and sensitive loads. A short-term demand peak solution is to vary the supply voltage by a few millivolts, or to vary the local frequency by a few millihertz. And this supply equals demand. It says, of course, that supply must keep up by turning on, say, another nuclear reactor, which could take weeks. Start up a new hydro turbine, which could take hours. Starting a gas turbine could take 20 minutes. But batteries, including utility-owned microgrid and EV connections, have been verified to respond in fractions of a second. Incentives are often used to have customers use less during high demand, i.e. time of use electricity rates, and I've included a URL for those interested in chasing that. Also, there's often special financial arrangement with local big industry on phase startup or shutdown of their power demand. And this is called demand response. Energy management is properly designed microgrid need not compromise comfort and convenience. There may well be some adjustments necessary to lifestyle, but lifestyle procedures quickly adjust and waste is eliminated. Of course, waste elimination is an NWA. Hot water is an excellent example. In my microgrid, we routinely heat our water only 4 times a day: shower, morning shower, lunch, evening meal, and end of day. It means that we prioritize different loads based on our own personal priorities. Energy awareness leads to self-imposed waste avoidance. Energy demand reduction becomes a lifetime challenge. DER roadmap. The IESO has prepared a document, and I make reference to it at the end of this presentation. And here's some of the actual words which they use in this document. A DER definition: one of the most significant changes to electricity systems around the world has been a rapid installation of distributed energy resources. DERs are connected directly to a local distribution system. They include solar panels, windmills, micro hydro plants, combined heat and power generation, battery storage, electric vehicles, and home and building consumers with their own microgrids who can reduce grid electricity use on demand using home batteries. Benefits. These resources can provide more control and choice for energy consumers, additional revenue streams, and sustainability opportunities for communities, and can help defer or avoid investments in new transmission infrastructure, with Ontario electricity demand forecast to increase this decade DERs can provide clean and local supply that helps keep the provincial grid reliable and affordable. Contract terms. While DERs can provide benefits to customers and the electricity grid, they currently in a very limited way. As a result, a DER roadmap has been developed to set out the IESO's goals, objectives, initiatives, and timing for DER integration. There are some demonstrations underway. The IESO has initiated a demonstration in the York region to explore how to use DERs as NWAs to help meet our electricity system demand. They use, when they are not in use, these NWAs, local ones, are in fact typically normally used to meet local system demands, and later when those demands have been met, they can then go off and support the wholesale level needs. DERs can offer services to defer, reduce, or avoid capital and operating costs associated with the distribution network. Avoid new expensive centralized generating infrastructure, nuclear, hydro, and diesel that are single points of failure. There is a great incentive to modernize using virtual power plants and potentially about 1 million DERs. The demonstration pilot project detailed objectives are: 1, explore the use of auctions to secure local capacity and local energy services. 2, exploring models of coordination and interoperability between the IESO, the transmission system operator, and the microgrid aggregator. Demonstrating the interest of parties in participating in and the potential for the creation of a local energy price. And 4, assessing the interest and ability of different DERs to compete to provide capacity and energy and reserve services through auctions. And 5, the operational impact of DERs on the local distribution system to facilitate the maintenance of safe, reliable, and efficient system operations. And the next slide continues with number 6, identifying market and system operations barriers to the use of DERs as NWAs and exploring potential solutions to such barriers. 7, exploring how elements and benefits of the wholesale electricity market could be extended to the distributed system level. And they mean by this, they mean the local distribution company. 8, drive community engagement and development by enabling local solutions to meet local needs. And the 9th and final one, assess the unique operational and reliability characteristics of particular DERs, both existing and those in the future, as compared to the traditional transmission level system resources that presently exist. In April of 22, the IESO announced 2 major Ontario pilot projects, aggregating DERs and microgrids using AI-powered tracking to show how aggregating clean energy assets can reduce energy costs, along with reducing carbon emissions while providing substantial economic resilience and sustainability gains. The objective is to pool together energy storage, electrical vehicles, and solar installations into one single resource. And links are provided here so that those interested can drill down for more information. Now, this graphic present representation, which I've taken from my microgrid, shows the solar generation on the left and over a 24-hour period. And you can see sunrise to sunset in the middle of that time period. And if you take a look at the demand side on the right-hand side, and you can see the load has a base level with 4 water heating spikes. Both have totally different shapes, and the control system must manage that supply to the demand. On the 14th of June of 2022, there were 37 kilowatt hours produced from the solar panel, 17 kilowatt hours was demanded. The excess was saved to the grid for energy credits. Aggregation of about 150 of these systems would be equivalent to a small modular reactor at 3 megawatt output. In Ottawa, there is a pilot project going on using artificial intelligence, and it's in collaboration between the IESO, the OEB, Blue Wave AI, and Hydro Ottawa. Pardon me, that should be OPG, not OEB. And Ottawa, and what they're doing is to take a look at the growing number of EVs drawing electricity from the local grid. The objective is, one, to use artificial intelligence to manage EV charging during peak demand periods, saving customers money while extending the life of electricity infrastructure. To create an online service for EV owners that will pool the storage and charging capabilities of EV batteries to smooth out demand peaks and take advantage of lower cost energy at off-peak hours for charging. And 3, to defer or reduce the need for capital infrastructure upgrades. And a quote which the IESO has made in one of its documents I thought was worthwhile. It said, working with Blue Wave AI and Hydro Ottawa creates an amazing opportunity to increase EV adoption. By adding energy storage to the grid, we can solve many problems the grid would otherwise experience as EV adoption increases. And of course, the EV everywhere link on the slide is a very good video that explains all that. Using these pilot project results. Now, they will take it, and of course, the first one is to establish the case for DER integration into IESO wholesale markets, where the DER is proved cost-effective and or where participation in wholesale markets would likely occur. 2, to inform wholesale markets, design priorities to capture services from and eliminate barriers to cost-effective DERs. 3, to identify circumstances where DERs prove cost-effective and or where adoption would likely occur, but where wholesale market integration may be less likely. And in such cases, identify potential alternative opportunities for capturing value from these DERs. And the 4th, to provide estimates of resource potential and costs that can be used to inform and illustrate resource choices as an alternative to large-scale supply-side investment on wires. And 5th, to identify and quantify cost-effective carbon emissions, carbon emission reduction opportunities, including targeted fuel switching towards electricity. Of course, they mean electrify everything. Microgrid demand. A microgrid, of course, has been defined as a controllable, self-sufficient energy system that serves a discrete geographic footprint Normally, they include local pairing of generation and storage that adapts in real time to the changing demand. They are often constructed in stages and have provisions for later modernization updates. They are electrical and thermal systems that permit individuals, communities, companies, organizations to take control of their energy future with priority on economic and social benefits and environmental benefits. The future of deeply decarbonized grids will combine technologies designed to generate around-the-clock zero-emission power with others that store energy for months and make the grid run more flexibly. Microgrids with vehicle-to-grid connectivity can assist the power grid with demand response and storage. Details of microgrids. Microgrids are energy systems that supply local loads, and they may deliver some excess electrical energy to the grid. They may have storage capacity like batteries or other technologies. They may include geothermal for heating, cooling, and low-grade thermal storage, and that has a coefficient performance often greater than 10, but a minimum of 4.2. They may include air-to-air heat pumps, which have a coefficient of performance of about 2 to 3. They may include EV charging and vehicle-to-grid connectivity, V2G. Vehicle-to-load, in fact, was verified recently by running an EV-powered electric barbecue on Petrie Island on Canada Day. They may have a contract with a local distribution company to sell or store excess power or produce green hydrogen. More details, they may be an R&D platform that may have many Internet of Things sensors, actuators, command and control communications and intelligence with data storage, performance graphics, smartphone interfaces. There are clearly unlimited AI and display options possible. It often includes the ability to island in part or in total, either from behind the meter or ahead of the meter. An isolated DER becomes a standalone microgrid. No such thing as one microgrid configuration. Equipment can be from one solar panel or a single vehicle to grid to an entire military base designed to power a 100-acre base for at least 14 days, as is common in the USA. Design and operational control systems are wide open to creativity and innovation to meet unique local requirements. Many jurisdictions are well advanced in integrating DERs with the grids. Some have years of experience, but there's no question there's explosive growth already underway. The geopolitics, of course, in the EU-Russian energy adjustment is providing the political will to speed innovation and deployment within the EU. Now, delivery rates. If you compare utility bills in different parts of the province, you'll notice that consumption rates vary. These differences are the result of the age and condition of each LDC's equipment, the size of the utility service area, the customer density and location of customers relative to one another, the number of residential customers compared to the number of business and industrial customers, the geographic location of customers, and the complexity of maintaining distribution equipment within the region. For example, it can be more costly to maintain equipment in a more rural or cottage areas due to the terrain. Power losses over long distances are typically less than 7%. A dispersion aggregation of microgrids can assist in modernization of these, can assist in moderation of these costing factors. This next graphic is really rather nice. It shows off on the right renewable energy being solar voltaics. It could be a wind farm or one windmill, energy storage of all sorts of technologies, other generators, and many of those can exist. They can include, of course, charging of EVs, and look at the loads provided by homes, the load provided by commercial and industrial buildings, and load from communities and institutions. Now that's the microgrid, and of course, once it is connected to the utility, it becomes a DER. Now I want to get into microgrids and drill down into the many benefits. And I've got 16 of them, so bear with me. I'll try and get through them as fast as I can. Reliability. Microgrids keep behind the meter power flowing by disconnecting or islanding from the central grid when it begins to fail. The microgrid generators and possibly batteries then serve the microgrid's customers until power is restored on the central grid. Design requirements drive the mix and size of the generators and storage. In a significant and long-term emergency, city, provincial, and federal emergency services could be overwhelmed with demand for their services. This leaves most citizens to survive according to their own preparations. Those with no preparations will likely suffer the most. Government proposed goals and commitments of improved reliability are not the same as real action and progress in delivery. Microgrids are often explained as energy independence, self-sufficiency, or energy security. Some people use the term off-grid. I don't believe that any of those are adequate to supply and to describe a microgrid. And the second one being resilience. Of course, resilience describes the ability to avoid power outages in the first place, or to recover quickly using event management techniques if they do occur. Resilience results from the ability to manage and coordinate information from the microgrid command center for fault identification and rapid grid reconfiguration, or use of alternate operating modes. This may provide for delivery of electrical energy to emergency services using EVs and their mobile battery. For example, charge an EV at home and drive to a local hospital to discharge the stored energy, return to get more portable, non-fossil energy onto EV wheels for transportation to another emergency. This is known as vehicle to everything. AI can optimize interaction of EVs with the electrical grid by tracking the connect time, power level usage, and location of EVs undergoing connection through a qualified charger. Energy cost benefit 3. Microgrids reduce costs through the efficient generation and management of the supplied energy. They generate revenue by selling energy back to the grid. A microgrid can be utility owned and operated, or it may be community or business owner operated. Community ownership permits the community to decide on the next phase of system improvement based on profits from past sales. They could even pass profits onto their local community consumers via lower electricity rates. Good management rewards community consumers with financial and other benefits. Clean and green, benefit number 4. Microgrids can employ a wide range of green power production technologies. It may be free of fossil fuel burning. Ecologically responsible battery alternatives have been and are being developed. Decarbonization means reduced greenhouse gases and reduced particulate matter added to the atmosphere. Microgrids intelligently integrate these renewables into the energy mix. Demand and generating readiness status intersect in real time without leaving a trail of garbage to be ignored or dealt with it sometime later, if it is ever dealt with. Microgrids function within the intersection of energy, behavior, and ecology. They are assisting in preparing for the future through the power of the very powerful social structure of communities by encouraging creativity and imagination. Wireless solution number 5, wireless alternatives. Microgrids can also help ease the strain on the central grid during periods of peak demand. They act as additional local supply sources that grid operators can call upon. They avert the need to build more distant power plants on vulnerable transmission lines to serve the central grid. Most electrical energy is used almost immediately after it's generated. Stored electrical energy is almost twice the cost of just generated energy. Hence, keeping the supply close to demand with local storage is a very attractive feature of microgrids within the main grid. An interesting analysis concluded by 2030, EV battery storage capacity will be more than 6 times Ontario's forecast peaker energy demand deficit. With microgrid generation and home storage participation, this margin would be very much higher. Versatile emergency operations need large margins like this. And continuing with benefit number 5, some studies consider the number of microgrids required to prevent building a nuclear, hydro, or thermal plant as the electrify everything demand growth. Also used when intentionally shutting down wildfire-threatened transmission towers or extraordinary peak demands during heat waves and stationary cold front disasters that may lead to intentional rolling blackouts or brownouts. Musk, of course, of Tesla and SpaceX fame, is working with Texas and California grid regulators and managers to build out several virtual power plants, VPPs, using aggregation of many geographically dispersed microgrids from local communities. Each aggregation could be equivalent of a SMR, where an SMR can be from 3 megawatts up to 300 megawatts. Number 6, cybersecurity. The Canadian power grid has not been inflicted with a cyber attack that causes loss of power, but many experts are concerned about its vulnerability and are taking proactive measures. Installing microgrids for energy security is among them. Should the main grid generator be attacked, the microgrid has its own power sources to rely on, and they can also isolate from the internet. Effective cyber attacks on microgrids would be rendered increasingly difficult to the attacker as large numbers increase, say up to about 1 million, and they're often intentionally invisible on the cloud edge. Social value. Number 7. The microgrid community is not using power from the plant hundreds of kilometers away. A microgrid can be a local asset by keeping the customer comfort and convenient cost rates low and providing local employment. The objective is to make microgrids a valued feature in a neighborhood, not something separate and invisible to people as conventional energy tends to be. They provide the ability to manage community power demand dynamics with community resources. During emergency events, volunteers are being encouraged to assemble at this command center for deployment to assist others in the community with repairs, injuries, evacuations, assistance to seniors, animal and pet services, basement floodings, et cetera, et cetera. And they are in fact becoming the local first response center. It could also be a local emergency transportation and communications hub. With appropriate design, it could be a continuing source for banking, fresh water, food distribution, and other services. Benefit number 8, well-being. The neighborhood microgrid becomes a place of refuge where community members can come to seek help, get clean water, charge cell phones, get news, other telephone, radio, TV, internet, and have emergency EV transportation, heating and cooling stations, access electrical power to charge cellular phones, limited cooking and hot water, personal hygiene, security, and companionship. All this comes without particulate air pollution and the noise that is made from gas generators. When all else fails, everybody in the local community can feel comfortable knowing that there's at least one place that they can go where the power is always on, and they can communicate to their families and neighbors that they are okay. Also, EVs may be charged when the grid outage is widespread and commercial charging stations are non-functional. Benefit 9, versatility. In both normal and survival modes, there are many ways to optimize energy use through risk management. Flexibility and versatility are vital to graceful survival. Intentionally oversizing the generators and storage capacity provides operational versatility prior to, during, and after a grid level disaster. Failure modes and aging or damage degradation will utilize this versatility to maintain production. Experience with live testing on the Microgrid microgrid of low energy demand scenarios have transported some of the gained experience into normal procedural changes, which I use to eliminate waste. Benefit 10, long-term economic value. 1 in 5 Canadians live in energy poverty, meaning they spend a disproportionately high percentage, greater than 6%, or 2 times more than the normal household of their income on home energy bills. A simple singular solar panel microgrid reduces this charge, and a properly designed microgrid will drive this 6% down to 0. Over-designed microgrids mean they produce more than they consume. The excess is sold to the main grid or used to produce hydrogen, which is also sold. They are long-term investments with payback. They could increase the resale value of the building as well. 11, energy awareness. Microgrid owners tend to pay closer attention to the factors affecting energy demand. Energy literacy promotes more efficient use of resources. Example, you improve insulation, replace windows and doors, do washing on weekends, wear a sweater, set thermostat power, buy an EV, etc., etc. The energy you don't use is very important. Some microgrid owners keep notes by considering energy flows down to 1 kilowatt hour of production or consumption. Lifestyle adjustments, procedural changes, or home renovations often follow. You can't manage what you can't measure, and microgrids provide many opportunities to measure energy flows. Creativity and imagination get stimulated, and soon there is action on demand side management. Number 12, inflation. The impacts of traditional energy price inflation are sharply reduced or totally avoided, which encourages the microgrid managers to be more self-sufficient or an energy exporter. The real world consists of ever-increasing energy costs. There's no limits on this growth, which could depend on geopolitical wars and economic arrangement anywhere on the planet. Disconnecting from the inflating energy supply infrastructure is often a microgrid owner's primary objective. Installation costs become an investment that can yield about 10% ROI, that is independent of stock exchange, index dynamics, and billionaire or moral financial fiddling, often called stealing from the poor to give to the rich. Microgrid benefits number 13, compatibility with nature. PV solar cells intercept solar radiation, convert it to electricity that is then used in the shelter with the heat generated from lights, appliances, etc., eventually return to the atmosphere or Earth as its natural sink. It is temporary use of that energy as it's passing through. Ground source heat pumps absorb thermal energy from the soil that is then used in the shelter to warm the internal air and domestic hot water, with the heat eventually returning to the atmosphere or Earth's natural sink. It is temporary use of that energy as it's passing through. There are no other energy sources or sinks in this microgrid. The only operational impact is a short time delay of hours until the energy is returned to its natural sink. And I assert that the Manotick microgrid energy system is 100% compliant with nature's and natural energy flows. Benefit 14, survival and compatibility with disasters. Ontario and Quebec failures of the 21st of May of 2022 resulted in KCOR advocating for microgrids on radio, TV, and the print media. The provided links on this slide are typical of how the media captured the story of outage survival. Prior to, during, and after a disaster, basic survival needs are personal health status, shelter integrity, energy for heat, cool, and appliances, food and water, communications, transportation, personal hygiene, entertainment, and goods and services. A microgrid can assist in delivery of energy in support of all these needs. The Canadian Association for the Club of Rome produced a booklet in July of 2019 with 11 contributing KCOR authors, which we titled Plan to Survive. And that URL is available on the slides when they're made available to you. Benefit 15, community considerations. Microgrid platform is a collection of parts operating as a system. There's no limitation on the number of parts that can be integrated into this platform. Operating modes can then be developed for unique consumption trends within communities. Future growth to add a new energy generation or storage capacity or management systems are readily accommodated. Global and local R&D lead to technological advances and product upgrades that are advancing at an incredible rate. There's always the opportunity to change something and measure the impact, which is typically called research and development. A microgrid and an aggregated community of microgrids are learning platforms for discovery and applying more information. A community of microgrids can have a real-time dynamic geographic boundaries, connection pathways based on outage damage, location of the damage, loads, and individual microgrid production capacity are primary factors used in grid energy flow configuration changes. Transmission and distribution resiliency planning are used to identify initial community DER placements, configurations, and viable pathways along a feeder. One is reminder of training using war games and what-if scenarios in order to optimize the system and train operators. Item 16, or benefit 16, cost avoidance in repairs. The advantage of proactive adaptation to climate change impacts suggests design hardening, relocation, redundancy, and regular forward planning. The benefit-to-cost ratio of proactive adaptation has been studied based on a current business-as-usual greenhouse gas growth release, and B, reduced emission scenario, which leads to benefit to cost ratios of 9-to-1 through 20 or 38-to-1. Instead of waiting for damage to happen and being in a catch-up and repair mode constantly, it is suggested that least expensive adaptation should be started now. Ontario grid repair designs after the Greco in Ottawa are still based on average weather conditions for the past 20 years. Replacement of old transmission components is the old standard procedure without significant hardware hardening. This is short-term economic savings or long-term massive vulnerability. Overlapping repair, replacements, and weather events will soon be unaffordable, and outages will be very much longer than a few days. And community microgrids. This is something I thought I would share with you because it really is quite unique. And it's happening in the USA now, where networks of off-grid home microgrids, including EVs, are connected by a DC cable bus that loops through the neighborhood. This allows the homes to share their energy resources. These now exist and are under development in Florida, Texas, California, Maryland, Illinois, and Utah, with interest in other states. The lead company wants to work with 10,000 customers by 1024 with the eventual goal of 40,000 customers. The company sees itself eventually becoming something like a national utility, serving a network or digitized network of off-grid systems. A link to the original article, of course, is included in the slide. And of course, this should get the attention of the utilities in North America. If the utilities don't provide the reliable service, some other private sector entrepreneurs will do it. And the energy transition. Microgrids and DER is an essential part of modernization of the Ontario power grid. Upon acceptance, a pilot project verified business models is expected to trigger great interest from governments and the private sector. The business arrangement is for microgrid to receive reasonable compensation for its value. Cities and local distribution companies will have new command and control responsibilities like keeping first responders and essential services operational during disasters. Aggregation of buildings, fleets of electric vehicles with 2, 3, 4, and more tires, and communities into virtual power plants are expected to fully transform the electrical grid infrastructure to the benefit of all. Studies estimated solar achievable potential in Ontario of an estimated 5 gigawatts to 26 gigawatts. Say that's equivalent to about 87 small modular reactors at 300 megawatts or 8,700 SMRs at 3 megawatts. Imagine the cost saving and grid hardening impact of an equivalent of 8,700 SMR distributed to every corner of Ontario. And in summary here, summary of microgrid features. Terms include efficiency, sustainable, reliable, flexible, resilient, profitable, distributed, scalable, and good neighbor friendly to the community and nature while providing disaster readiness. End user adoptions may not exclusively be economic, as some uptake might be driven primarily by other microgrid benefits, regardless of their cost effectiveness, like the military and strategic government assets. They provide for fossil fuel-free energy supply for one constant critical energy flows, heat and electricity to meet community, business, or organization mission objectives. 2, highly flexible operational uses with and without an active emergency. 3, provide for community interface and community management for normal and survival operations. 4, long-term business profit center provides low-cost energy to customers, grid storage, and power as well as grid ancillary services, also EV charging management and vehicle to grid connection. The electrify everything transition. There are many market studies with some pundits predicting massive divestments from fossil fuels into renewables in the next decade. Microgrids with EVs using advanced AI and blockchain record keeping are in development. And in fact, one divestment pundit even suggested 150 trillion. Yes, that's $150 trillion in a great market distortion starting soon. And that was their terms, great market distortion. One study concluded that DERs can contribute to 25 to 80% of Ontario's additional capacity needs over the next decade. Well, I hope this presentation inspires kickstarting individual microgrid projects, policymakers and funders to consider this wide range of factors in their efforts to boost early climate change community adaptation using microgrids. And the last slide is, and I repeat, the objective of this presentation has been to introduce a fair and effective means to assisting climate change mitigation, adaptation and resilience while reversing the cost escalation of electrical energy for all Ontario consumers. This is a Canadian Association for the Club of Rome outreach topic that is seeking reduction in the demand for fossil fuels in the electrical power and transportation sectors. The IESO reference in this slide was published about a month ago. Although the contents are current and vital for planning affordable adaptation and mitigation changes using renewable energy in Ontario and possibly other jurisdictions. The adaptation reference has some excellent material, which fully supports this presentation. Unfortunately, it fails to mention microgrids and DERs, as the authors are unfamiliar with these terms. And that concludes my presentation. Over to you, Rick.
Well, Art, thank you for a very, very fulsome briefing on microgrids and their potential or possibilities. We are running a bit short on time, and we've got 5 questions so far, so I think we'll just move on to them right now. The first on deck will be John Hollins, and Bill Reese, you can be at the ready to come on deck, so you can put your video and your unmute your mic.
Thank you, Rick. You hearing me okay? And look, I like the cartoon. Simple but wrong, or complex but right. This is certainly complex. Art, you painted a picture of a grand transition. That reminds me a little bit of another transition that was described by Ralph Torrey back in April, when he talked about the transition from horse-drawn vehicles to motor-driven vehicles. That only took 10 years. This is going to take longer than that, I think, and it's a much bigger, more complex thing. You also observe that the grid is old and fragile, but I'm encouraged by the demonstrations that have been launched already by the authorities. What do you think would be the most cost-efficient ways for the grid to begin to prepare, starting right now? What should it be doing right now to go where you've suggested is possible?
Okay, in fact, this has been the topic, of course, of a lot of internal documents by the IESO, and in fact, I even prepared a slide called Grid Enhancing Technologies, which address some of the major points of your question. What they have to look at, of course, is to look at how they can use their existing lines and have it rated dynamically, because it depends on the load and the flow direction and the existing designs of those wires and the equipment that is hanging off them. So they have to take a look at a lot of sections of each one of the grid components. They also have to be able to control these power flows, which means they have to maintain measurement. Of course, AI plays a significant role. They have to provide supervision, either human and or through software, as well as fault awareness. They have to optimize the system topology. I mean, there's many options are available. And of course, this is, got a good spin-off to it, and that as they're going through this, it's good news for disaster operations, looking at the many ways that they can configure this topology. Now, the cost, this is one thing which got my attention when looking at this, that they said, we're only going to consider options with a benefit to cost ratio greater than 4. There's just so many possibilities that they're just totally overwhelmed, and they're saying, look, we'll put those which are less cost effective, we'll put them on the back burner. And of course, the local distribution infrastructure has set a local priority using, of course, non-wired alternative hardware as well. I can only say this, John, that there's a lot of material on it, but this is basically what they're all looking at.
Thank you, Art. Does that answer your question, John?
He's gone.
I take it that you're good. Bill, we'll take your question now, Bill Reese, and John Meyer, you'll be on deck for the next one.
Thank you, Rick, and thanks very much, Art, for an extremely comprehensive and I guess encouraging presentation. That said, any major population correction is not going to be voluntary, and it will result in local and geopolitical chaos, desperate mobs, property destruction, mass migration, and a variety of other obviously disruptive activities. So your solution, it seems to me, requires relative continuity and sociocultural stability, doesn't it?
Yes, and I must admit the concept of having an armed turret on the top of my head or my house is not something I would actually plan. And I would hope that there are sufficient number of microgrids available where this mob mentality would be more of let's participate with you rather than overwhelm and destroy. But human nature being what it is, yes, I think your comment is valid, and I certainly don't know a solution to that one.
Do you want to follow up, Bill?
No, I think Art is absolutely correct. It's as somebody said, was it that famous baseball player, the future, it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future, and this is certainly one of those cases.
So true. Okay, we'll take your question, John Meyer, and Jeff Strong, you'll be on deck for the next one if you wish to discuss what you have been discussing offline with Raymond Lurie.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please, John.
Okay, Art, just a few more details on your setup here. I'm saying here in the chat that you've got 15 kilowatt capacity or so, and I would estimate that produces 18 to 20,000 kilowatt hours annually. And it produces almost double the amount of power that you require, both for your home and for your vehicles. Are those figures in the ballpark? And if you do have a net surplus of maybe 8 to 10 kilowatt hours, what does the grid pay you for that?
Okay, you're absolutely correct. I am over-designed, and I sell the excess power which is generated, and I sell that to the Hydro One at 29.4 cents per kilowatt hour.
Wow.
And that is, well, it used to be much higher. They were, that's the microfit program, which has since been canceled. And I was one of the lowest paid because I was right at the tail end. And some people were getting as high as 80 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
So, but that's no longer available. But yes, that's why I say this is an investment. It's not a cost, because I'm selling my excess power generation, and quite frankly, it was one of the reasons why I intentionally put more power than I could possibly use on my roof to help pay for the whole installation. And I know some colleagues of mine, and perhaps some even on this link, have we're getting 80 cents per kilowatt hour, and it sure is nice to see $800 a month rolling in to help pay for their initial cost.
Okay, yeah, good. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Jeff Strong, you'll be giving Art your question if you wish, and Peter Mckinnon, you're on deck for the next one.
Yeah, I was just asking how much the constant charging and energy storage of an EV battery, how does it affect its lifetime? And Ray Lurie and John Mayer have sort of answered it, although I'm still a bit fuzzy on it. Maybe you can elaborate on it. Do you want me to say what they're?
Well, I can say a little bit, but
yeah,
I charge my EV every night, and I put it on trickle charge. If you put it on slow charge and you're not in a rush, that's fine. And typically run the charge and keep the stated charge of the battery between 20% and 80%. And they're designed to take that 3,500 times. That means 10 years of full cycle. And that's the same with my home batteries. They do take the charge, and yes, there is some degradation of the capacity over time. But this is what the constant R&D program that is going on with EV batteries to improve that degradation, both with temperature and with time, or number of cycles. And right now, the one that's getting the most publicity is the 4680 cells, which they refer to as the million-mile battery, which means you can charge and discharge it enough to get 1,000,000 miles out of your vehicle before you see any significant degradation. Well, I mean, that poses a whole new vision in my mind that says once you buy one of these 1,000,000-mile batteries, you're going to wear the vehicle out, so you unbolt the vehicle from the battery and and put a new canopy on, as it were. And so you can, with time, change your vehicle from an SUV to a sports car to a pickup truck, you know. It's the same battery, keep the battery. Maybe you can even pass the battery on in your will. I don't know what the other guy said, but I presume it's similar to that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. And our last questioner, as time is coming down to the hour here, will be Peter Mckinnon. And Peter has two questions, and I think there will be time for Art to answer them both.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you very much, Art, for a really interesting presentation. My questions are in two types. One is about generally about microgrid, and the other is about your microgrid. So I was just wondering, how do you see, or what do you see as the opportunity and the benefits of scaling microgrids to support large buildings, such as a hospital, large condos, or apartment buildings? That was my first question. And my second question is just related to your own microgrid. How do you manage snow and ice loads? Thank you.
Okay. Scaling to large buildings. Well, in fact, I gave one example there where the U.S. military, their microgrid is 100 acres with many buildings in there and unique requirements. There's no the term scaling has been addressed and it's being utilized. Yes, things can scale to large buildings and to communities. They can include all sorts of very unique requirements, and as I've tried to indicate, there's so many different technologies out there that can be brought to bear on whatever unique requirements are envisaged by the microgrid owners. And I've had no information, or have no information that says there is some maximum size beyond which you just can't go. I don't believe there is. You can just keep adding more and more components and to the microgrid. Now, getting to my own one, how do I handle snow and ice? Very badly. When I have a snowstorm and it's really quite miserable, I have what is known as a roof rake, which I can stand on the ground and get the top 30, 40, centimeters of snow off. My next step is to go and hire somebody who's younger and agile to climb up a ladder and use the roof rake to reach much further up. And I've done that, and just to keep it functional. But it's interestingly, this typically happens in the time of the year when the azimuth and elevation and length of the solar day are very small. The azimuth and elevation are low. That means the intensity coming in is quite small, and typically they're very cloudy days, and that's why in the material I presented you saw those wiggly lines, or the one wiggly line showing summer and winter. I mean, it's a massive difference. And snow load and ice is one of the contributing, or well, a major contributing factor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We have enough time to squeeze in at least one more question. It will be from John Hollins, and possibly the last question from Mary Hagan. We'll just see how the time is and whether we're permitted to go beyond the 3 o'clock usual deadline.
Thank you, Rick. Art, we all know that you're an accomplished engineer and an extraordinary handyman. Now, to put together your system, you were the general contractor, and you must have been able to find the contractors you needed to install solar panels and all that kind of thing. If your next door neighbor wanted to follow your example, would your neighbor be able to find a general contractor with sufficient command of the entire system to get the job done well?
The answer is most certainly. And in fact, I have participated and worked with neighbors and others who are saying, look, I really want to do this, and how do I go about it? And I indicate the general contractors I used, and don't forget the people that I worked with 5 years ago have five years of experience now, as do I, and I say, well, I'd be happy to work with you to be an interpreter between the general contractor and yourself, and so that I'm as it were, a trusted colleague, and to make sure that everything is in fact understood and all the options are explored and explained properly. And in fact, the contractors themselves, the more of these that they do, the more they really understand and are trying to work with people who are not engineers and do not have a background of R&D, and they're not asking for all sorts of extra instrumentation and measurement devices and what have you. And of course, at the same time, the equipment that you're buying, I mean, the command and control systems that come with Tesla batteries and with EVs and with solar systems, I mean, they've really advanced in the 5 years I've been involved, and I think they're just more and more user friendly and accessible by even those who have low technical literacy.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Mary, I wonder if Art hasn't answered your question, at least in part.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, Rick. I just want to build on John's question very quickly and ask, at the local community neighborhood level, where can they go to get a Build Microgrid toolkit and some training and someone like you to hold their hands? In other words, people are being committed to try this. Where do they go for help?
Okay, typically people who want to, as it were, dip their feet in the water, initially want to start with solar on their roof. And because that seems to be something which people understand, because they see it often, and therefore, they can go to any solar installer because they're used to getting inquiries like this. And they have a sales force that can interact with people at almost any technical level, and hopefully end up coming up with a design that's suitable for that structure. And because they do things like doing shadow analysis, with trees around, and which is the south-facing roof and what is the angle and all that. They're very good at it. I would say to anybody, just go to you're, you know, a local solar installer. I used iSolera, and I mean, they've done thousands of installations. There's, you know, and they're extremely trustworthy and technically capable, and you can talk to them, you know.
Thank you.
I think, thanks for the question, Mary. And I think because this is such an interesting topic, we can allow one more question, and we'll conclude with a question from Peggy Atherton. Welcome aboard, Peggy.
Thanks, Art. Thanks, Rick, and thank you, Art, for a very informative session. I'd just like to let you know that we have been making a little bit of progress with our condominium development. We have an environmental alternatives group, and I will be in a section focus group, which is focusing on solar, electric vehicles, and energy storage, batteries and generators. And we will present a report to the board of directors to gain their permission to install solar panels on my roof and hopefully on other people's roofs. At the moment, we have been denied that permission, but we're making slow progress. And Art is very familiar with my case.
That's very interesting, Peggy. Thank you. We're doing much the same as you are, so we'll get in touch about that. So to conclude today's presentation, I'd like now to call on the chair of the board of directors of the Canadian Association of the Club for Rome, Jean Doherty.
Thank you, Rick and Art. It is today indeed my pleasure and my privilege, but my pleasure to thank you very much for a very informative talk. It's nice to have something that is geared more towards an individual level, something that most of us have definitely had a lot of interest in and what we can do to help ourselves. I really, really want to thank you for a really wonderful talk. Thank you. And with that, for those of you who are new to this particular session, I would strongly encourage you to go to our website, canadiancore.com. And on that website, you can find the Stay Informed section, which will actually get you a link to the talk that Art has given today, as well as the other over 100 talks that have been done over the last 2 years of the pandemic and our Zoom series sessions going on. So I would strongly encourage you to go and look at our website, find the information about this particular talk. On the website, you will also find information about our organization as well. If you're interested in becoming involved in the Club of KCOR and join as a member, the membership information is there as well. And when you go to our YouTube channel, if you want to subscribe, you are more than welcome to do that, and you will be automatically getting all the information about new talks as they get put up. So again, thank you everybody for coming today in the middle of a lovely summer afternoon. And Art, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation.